Welcome on in to the Cleveland Browns report. Coming up on today's episode, we've got a 53-man roster projection following minicamp and going into training camp. Now, full disclosure, I really struggled making today's episode. It was tough to cut this roster down to 53 players. This is probably the least confident I've ever been in a roster projection, which I know I'm not doing a great job of selling myself at the moment, but I just want to be transparent and honest with you guys. So, with that being said, if you can't wait for week 1 to get here, hit that thumbs up button. There's going to be some people out there that are going to make you believe that preseason has football being back. No. Football is not back until Thursday Night Football going into NFL week 1. That is when football is back. Do not fall for anything before that. So if you can't wait for football to be back, hit that thumbs up button. Now, let's go in what kind of makes some football sense of an order of a roster breakdown, starting at the quarterback position, where the Browns currently have 4 quarterbacks. They got Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I ultimately believe we're going to see 3 quarterbacks make the 53-man roster. Which 3? We know 2. Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson, right? Then you've got a little bit of a battle between Tyler Huntley and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And if you polled 100 in-the-know, in-depth, intelligent NFL fans and media members, we're talking QB3, which one would you rather have? I think more votes are going to go to Tyler Huntley. He's got a lot more experience, and he's had a lot of success at times with the Ravens. He's a Pro Bowl quarterback. The Browns, I think, would say they have 3 Pro Bowl quarterbacks on their team. I don't know if Jameis ever made a Pro Bowl, but if so, they'd have 3 Pro Bowl QBs. Unfortunately, that means DTR was left out, and I don't think that it's going to go as simple as they just cut DTR. My guess is a quarterback gets traded. But unfortunately, if we're doing 53-man roster projection, we got to kind of keep it in the white lines of who makes it and who doesn't. So I think we'll see a trade happen for either Huntley or DTR. But I want people to walk away from this video not getting super fired up, because it's important to remember, if the biggest debate and battle we have to have is who's the third quarterback on this team, we're in a pretty good spot as a team. Wouldn't you agree? If that's what people are going at each other's throats over, Tyler Huntley or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the Cleveland Browns are in a pretty good spot compared to where they have been at the past few years, where they would go at each other's throats over who their starting quarterback was. Moving on to the running backs now. You've got, 3, 6, 7 running backs currently on the 90-man roster. I think we will see 4 running backs make the 53-man roster. Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, D'Onta Foreman, and Nyheim Hines. Now, Hines is going to primarily just be a special teamer. The guy does not take a lot of touches out of the backfield, a lot of carries. He's going to be your kick return specialist. Maybe we see him on some screen plays and things like that. But the big question is, does Nick Chubb start the year on injured reserve? The NFL changed their rules where you can now place players on IR before roster cutdown day, and they're not lost for the entire season. So if the Browns think that Nick Chubb could miss the first month of the season, the first 4 weeks, they could put him on IR in August, and then they don't have to waste a roster spot on him and do the whole charade of you put Nick Chubb on the 53-man roster, the next day you put him to IR, and then you sign someone who you cut yesterday back to your roster and hope they didn't get claimed by another team on the waiver wire. Now you no longer have to deal with that headache. So I think Nick Chubb will be ready to roll for the month of September at some point, which means I don't think he will start the year on injured reserve. Now, when it comes to Nick Chubb in 2024, over or under 1,000 rushing yards? I'm going to go with the overs, but I do think that if you say under, you're not crazy for it. We need to see Nick Chubb play a high volume of games to reach 1,000 yards, especially coming off the injury he sustained. So I'll be a half glass full guy and say over. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Moving on to the wide receiver room. Very jam-packed room, right? You've got Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash. I think all 5 of those guys are just locks to make the roster based on their skill and their recent draft status, which means you have players like David Bell, Michael Woods, Jalen Darden, James Prochet, and some other recent UDFAs battling for a final wide receiver spot. I think the Browns go with 6 wide receivers. We have our obvious locks, Cooper, Jeudy, Moore, Tillman, and Thrash. And ultimately, I think David Bell ekes it out. Now, I could see them pivoting off of David Bell, for special teams value, right? The new kick return rule this year is going to have a lot of extra emphasis placed on your return men. So if you noticed in my previous running back projections, I didn't have Pierre Strong Jr. on there, which I kind of regret, but I think you're going to see it's going to be really hard to get every player you want on the roster. So that could mean that David Bell, who's a good wide receiver, loses a spot for a guy who can help out in kick returns because that's going to be a bigger point of emphasis this year. Tight end room-wise, it's not that deep of a room. You got David Njoku, Jordan Akins, Giovanni Ricci, who they signed in March early in free agency, kind of a tight end fullback combo, and then a couple of UDFAs, Zaire Mitchell-Payton, and then Welch, who they got out of Wyoming this year. I think we'll see 3 players from this room make the roster: the Chief, Akins, and then I'll go Giovanni Ricci. They signed him so early in free agency. I think there's some sort of plan in place that, hey, you lose your fullback last year, Nick Harris, to the Seahawks to play his usual position, center. They probably want to find a new replacement, and that could be Ricci in the fullback position. So I'll give him a roster spot as well. Offensive line, a lot of good candidates here, right? You got your top 5 starters, toss in Dawand Jones. You got recent draft picks like Zach Zinter and Luke Whippler. Ultimately, I think there's going to be 10 offensive linemen that make the 53-man roster. Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin, Dawand Jones, Hakeem Adeniji, Joel Petonio, Wyatt Teller, Zach Zinter, Michael Dunn, Ethan Posick, and Brian Allen. I've got your 2 starting tackles. You could say your 3 starting tackles. I think they'll take 4 tackles altogether, and Hakeem Adeniji take that spot over James Hudson. You got your starting guards, 2 backup guards, Zinter, a draft pick this year, and Michael Dunn, who they brought back. Starting center and Ethan Posick, and then a backup in Brian Allen, who they also signed this offseason. Now, this is a good part in the show to remind everyone, injuries will happen, unfortunately, during preseason and training camp. So right now, before you all start throwing tomatoes at me for leaving your favorite bubble player off, it's a good reminder that there are going to be roster spots that open up because inevitably injuries will pop up. Look at the last just 2 years. 3 roster spots open up in the month of August when Jakeem Grant goes down. Michael Woods pops his Achilles in April or May. Jacob Phillips suffers another season-ending injury, unfortunately. So you can almost bank on 2 to 3 extra roster spots. So we're looking for 53 right now, but we're really looking for 56 because there's going to be some player or 2 or 3 in the initial 53 that unfortunately likely suffers a season-ending injury. Now, before we look at the defensive side of the football, if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so. We got free daily videos, weekly live shows, Tuesdays and Fridays, plus we're doing Madden simulations for the entire 2024 schedule, interactive content. I think it's one of the fastest growing Browns YouTube communities out there with nearly 35,000 subscribers strong. So if you have not subscribed yet and you're looking to add a little bit more to your Browns news and rumors feed, I invite you to subscribe down below. Let's switch gears to the defensive line now. You've got your obvious candidates that we really don't need to name. And then after that, you've got some bubble guys. I went back and forth with the defensive line more than any other room. So here's what I came out with. Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Okoronkwo, Alex Wright, then Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson, Michael Hall. Those 8 players are locks to make the roster, in my opinion. Then you've got guys like Isaiah McGuire and Maurice Hurst on the bubble, who I am going to tentatively put in at the moment, which means someone like Siaka Ika, who was just a 3rd-round pick last year that basically redshirted their freshman year in the NFL, is off the roster. And I don't like this. I don't. But someone tell me, where does Ika go? Honestly, we just went through 10 names right there. Whose spot is he taking on that list? Surely not any of the 8 locks we just said. Maybe Isaiah McGuire? But at the same time, then you've got 6 interior defensive linemen and only 4 pass rushers. The edge position is just a little bit more important. So I think Ty goes to a defensive end. And that's why, for now, I think Ika's one of those 54 through 56 guys on the roster where, unfortunately, when an injury pops up, that's probably going to give Ika a roster spot. Now, I've got some trivia I want to ask before we look at the rest of the defense. Who trails Myles Garrett in total sacks for the Browns since 2015, when they had 14 and a half sacks in their 4-year span in Cleveland? Let me know who basically is second in sacks for the Browns since 2015, because we know who's first, but who is second since 2015 with 14 and a half sacks? On to the linebacker room. This is where I had to kind of trim the fat because we are quickly running out of roster spots as we get to the back of the defense. So you've got your obvious guys, JOK and Jordan Hicks. And then I'm going to toss in Devin Bush as well, but I think he's a little bit of a bubble player because there weren't a lot of guarantees tossed into his contract. So the Browns could move on from him relatively easily despite signing him just a few months ago. I think we'll see 5 linebackers make the roster. JOK, Jordan Hicks, Devin Bush, rookie Nathaniel Watson, and then Tony Fields. I almost took Tony Fields off, but he's too valuable on special teams. So I think he stays because of his spot on special teams. Now, 5 linebackers is not a very deep room at all, but I think that's because we're going to see a lot of 2 linebacker sets. So really, you got 3 backups compared to 2 backups if the primary base defense will have JOK and Hicks, with Bush rotating on from time to time depending on what the personnel is for the offense. And then you've got 2 special teamers in Watson and Fields. As for the cornerbacks now, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome, we know they're all going to make the roster. Second-year man Cam Mitchell out of Northwestern is shaping up to be the first cornerback off the bench. I'm going to go with 5 corners, and I don't like how small this room is, but I am really running out of space on this roster. So Ward, Martin Emerson, Newsome, Cam Mitchell, and I put Justin Hardy because he's going to be a core special teamer on this team. Last year, that was kind of a Matthew Adams role, the linebacker. This year, they decide, let's go with a bit more of a faster special teamer in Justin Hardy. So I wish I could have a 6 cornerback, but unfortunately, I have to get this roster down to 53. So if there's another room, if there's another player to be added to a room, I think it would be the cornerback position. But we'll talk more about it at the end of the video. I don't know who you're leaving off that I currently have on my roster. And then finally, our safeties. Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, Rodney McLeod, and Ronnie Hickman. I really wanted to go with 5 safeties because I think we're going to see a lot of 3 safety looks with these 3 guys all taking the field and Ronnie Hickman serving as that first backup. But ultimately, I'm out of roster spots. Unless the Browns don't plan on ever snapping the ball to their kicker, punting the ball, or kicking the ball, you only get 50 players for your offense and your defense. And we had a near 50-50 split offense and defense. Ultimately, I think safety may be the deepest room the Browns have. I don't like the fact that I left off DeAnthony Bell, but I simply had to make some cuts somewhere, which is why I sound like a broken record where I go, they're not really trying to put together a 53-man roster. They're trying to put together a 56-man roster. It's a little bit like wedding invites. You know not everyone's going to come. So you know there are going to be, unfortunately, some guys who get injured in preseason, and that will open up a roster spot or 2. And then to round it out, our special teams unit, Charlie Hewlett, Corey Bojorquez, and Dustin Hopkins. Those are your 3 special teamers on the Browns roster. So some notable omissions. No DTR. I think one of the 4 quarterbacks will get traded. I don't like leaving off Pierre Strong Jr. because finally he can have a good role on special teams. But you signed Nyheim Hines for that role. So I don't really know who the next spot he's going to take, or Pierre Strong's spot's going to take. Don't love leaving off Michael Woods, but we didn't see him at all last year, so kind of out of sight, out of mind for the moment. Luke Whippler was a pick just 2 years ago, but them signing Brian Allen to be the backup center when it looked like Luke Whippler would take that role over from Nick Harris after he left in free agency made me queasy about where the Browns view Whippler. James Hudson, he had an opportunity last year to prove he can be a reliable swing tackle in the NFL after Wills, Conklin, and Jones all went down. And he was a bit of a basket case. So, unfortunately, he gets left off. And then on the defensive side of the football, Ika, like I talked about earlier, whose spot is he going to take on the defensive line? I'm a big advocate for Mo Hurst. He was really good last year. I don't see the Browns re-signing him just to cut him. Jawan Briggs was a 7th-round draft pick. Unfortunately, this was not a good year to be a late pick by the Browns because their roster was already pretty loaded. Diabate, who made their 53-man roster last year, I think is just a victim of the direction the NFL is going defensively with less linebackers. Khalif Halase, he was also on the Browns' 53-man roster last season. I've got him tentatively on the outside. Miles Harden was someone they drafted out of South Dakota. I think him and Briggs are really good candidates for the practice squad. And then DeAnthony Bell, unfortunately, finding himself on the outside. If he does end up getting cut, I don't see a way he gets past the waiver wire. Someone will pick him up immediately. So before we get on out of here, who trails Myles Garrett in sacks since 2015 with 14.5 in 4 seasons? Give you one last second to give your guesses down below in the comment section. Drum roll, please. Defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi from 2017 to 2020 put up 14.5 sacks. That is second in since 2015 on the Browns. And Myles Garrett's got about 88.5-ish sacks since entering the league in 2017. And I don't know if there's a bigger disparity between first and second. 88.5 and 14.5. Like, that's a huge gap. So I'll have to do some extra trivia research and see if that's the biggest gap in the AFC. But that will do it for us on today's episode. If you can't wait for week 1, hit that thumbs up button. Let's get some good vibes and some good times rolling as we pick a card to wrap up today's show. Producer Jack Lauderay on the 1s and 2s. Jack, I'm dropping cards. Which card do you want to go with?
This is tough. Excuse me. Let's go. So I was close last time.
Yep.
Let's do 7 of Jacks.
7 of Jacks?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go 9 of diamonds. 10 of spades. 10 of spades. We don't get 10s very often. All right. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will sign off and see everyone later.